Welcome to the inaugural PowerUp event. PowerUp is a global nonprofit initiative targeting seed-level female adventurers that attempts to bridge the gender funding gap worldwide. This is our first event where we already bringing together speakers from around the world, from the Middle East, Europe, United States, Africa, and Australia. And we have even more countries represented in the audience. This event is about inclusion, inspiration, innovation, and collaboration. Because only by coming together, we can make a global transformation happen. And only when men and women come together can we make true change happen. And that's why I'm a co-founder of PowerUp. My name is Victoria Yampolsky, and my other co-founder is Ham Hampton, who will be speaking with me later, who is a man. And I'm also joined here by another man who is my dear friend and colleague who will be moderating the panel with me, whose name is Steve Vilkas. And he's here representing 3 wonderful organizations who help us organize this event. The first one is Prepare for VC. Prepare for VC is a global venture hub headquartered in Boston, Massachusetts. Founded in 2016, the mission of Prepare for VC is to help as many startups as possible succeed with the focus on community, cohort-based, and individual programming. Through its combination of knowledge, expertise, and network, Prepare for VC helps entrepreneurs and their teams scale their startup story. The second organization is Boston New Technology, which actually is a community on ECOS, the platform where we are right now, and is hosting this event. Boston New Technology, one of the Boston's premier tech startup support organizations, has hosted hundreds of events in its 10-year history. As a non-for-profit community of 28,000 professionals across New England and 50,000 members across an ever-expanding ecosystem, Boston New Technology's mission, in collaboration with our many partners, is to help innovative businesses and startups launch and grow. And finally, Startup Grind Boston. And I'm sure you all, at least in the US, heard of Startup Grind as an organization. Startup Grind Boston is a community created in order to inform, inspire, connect, and empower. We believe in a better tomorrow is possible by supporting the innovators and risk takers of today. Trying to turn your dreams into reality by starting a business is hard. So we've built an environment where you can learn from and be supported by your fellow entrepreneurs and startup experts. Together, we can make the startup grind a little bit smoother. On a personal note, I want to say that I've known Steve for a number of years. This is our first event that we're doing together. I hope one of many more. And it's my pleasure to give him a chance to speak and represent our other partners in making this event possible. Steve.
Thank you very, very much indeed, Victoria. It is a pleasure to be here today for this fantastic inaugural event. And it is also my pleasure to introduce some of our other partners. So we are working with Anima. Anima is a US-based community for female founders, providing an empowering environment for women to authentically express themselves, harness the power of public speaking, share ideas, showcase their businesses, connect with like-minded individuals, and transform their visions into reality. With its focus on self-expression and public speaking, Anima stands as the ultimate space for fostering collaborations and creating impactful partner programs, with the ultimate goal being to help every woman unleash her inner potential. And as Victoria had also said, we are very privileged and appreciative of the fact that this is being hosted on ECOS. ECOS AI is an all-in-one engagement platform that is built for hybrid communities. We also are working with Female Founder Voices, and special shout out to Eva Weinstein, who introduced me to this platform. Female Founder Voices is her community, a vibrant and inclusive one designed to uplift and support female entrepreneurs as they navigate the challenges of building and scaling their businesses. The community of Female Founder Voices provides a safe and welcoming space where female founders can come together to share resources, network, and learn from one another. And lastly, Born Global as an organization has its chapter in Boston now, and it is on a voyage to cultivate a community for diverse innovators with a global mindset and to interconnect local, national, and international innovation ecosystems. Through conscious thought leadership, educational programs, and network expansion, the purpose-driven Born Global community acts as a catalyst for connection, collaboration, and growth across many different startup hubs. And we are very grateful to have them with us. And thank you again, Victoria, for that very warm and thoughtful introduction.
Thank you so much, Steve. And now we're going to start the panel. It is my pleasure to start introducing the speakers. We're going to be talking today about their personal journeys as well as their thoughts that they have on bridging the gender funding gap. And then we'll introduce PowerUp as one of the solutions to accomplish this around the globe. And the first speaker that I'm so honored to present is Rasha Kamhaye. I had the pleasure of meeting Rasha in October last year as this program was being put together. And I cannot say what a joy it has been to know you and to join as a PowerUp ambassador and to have you present on our panel. Rasha Kamhaye is a visionary and business leader who empowers technology startups to deliver impactful business models. With a background in both physics and finance and a passion to build economically profitable yet socially impactful businesses, Rasha founded Event Horizon, a boutique incubator accelerator that helps for-profit impact startups with a network of services in business development, intellectual property, investment strategy, and access to capital. As an angel investor, Rasha invests in early-stage startups in the fields of artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, climate change, alternative energy, and power generation. Prior to Event Horizon, Rasha had a career that spanned academia and finance. She led the investments and business development efforts of OSEA, a technology licensing company leading the remote wireless power industry globally. She helped shape OSEA's venture fundraising activities by securing multiple rounds of strategic financing from major industry players in North America, Europe, the Middle East, and Japan. She was the lead business development executive and in doing so served as a bridge between OSEA's engineering team and its growing list of global partners and customers. Her efforts also directly impacted the go-to-market strategy, the international standardization, the regulatory approvals for remote wireless power in the US and Japan. And how we met is because of Vital Voices. Rasha is a global ambassador with Vital Voices Global Partnership and a co-chair of Vital Voices Northwest Council. She's also a board member of Every Woman Treaty, a nonprofit advocating for a global treaty to end violence against women and girls. And it's my pleasure, Rasha, to give you an opportunity to share your thoughts with us today.
Thank you. Thank you so very much, Victoria, for inviting me to be part of this amazing panel and to be, invited to participate at the inaugural PowerUp Global event amongst some of the greatest women leaders and men in their fields to discuss ways by which we can collectively reduce the gender funding gap. I'd like to preface by reminding all of us to approach this issue with the mindset that there is no problem too big to be solved, and that a problem is also an opportunity. So to break down the problem of the disparity in access to financial resources between male and female entrepreneurs, one must recognize that different types of funding are needed at different stages of the business and for different reasons. So my contribution to the panel will be within my area of focus and experience, in that I will talk about the gender funding gap in relationship to early stage entrepreneurial activities. I consider the difference really lies in even before the first steps are taken in launching the business, and namely at the level of setting the intentions and motivations in starting a business, and how does the traditional funding community reacts to that. So data is supportive of this. Per the most recent Global Entrepreneurship Monitor report on women's entrepreneurship, more women report making a difference as the key motive to start a business. In contrast, more men report creating wealth or continuing a family tradition as to why they are starting a business. So, and as is the case with all intentions, making an impact by the woman entrepreneur finds its way to the defining features of her value proposition, of her business model, and of her pitch. Sometimes, not always, but sometimes, losing sight of how important it is for a business to make a compelling case that it is making a sustainable profit. While I do believe it is admirable that women focus on making an impact within their communities, it's actually one of the fundamental investment criteria of Event Horizon. I also require the business to show projections of making a sustainable profit and ultimately creating wealth for the stakeholders. So the good news is it's not an either or situation. So you can have both impact and return. This is achievable. And it actually demonstrates, frankly, business savviness when one considers that they are considering the value in the entire value chain. They're creating innovative business models that incorporate profit and impact. And I have encountered many success examples of that. I'd be happy to share those examples with the attendees in a list of women leaders around the world who have started impact businesses and are making profit and creating wealth in the process. So while traditional investors would like to see a return on investment and are more interested in wealth creation, the rise of the conscious investor is demanding to see social, environmental, climate return on investment, and therefore might be more interested in you, woman entrepreneur, making a difference in the world while building a profitable growth business. So make that compelling case, show that you thought of creating wealth alongside the impact, and seek conscious investors that value the value creation that you're creating in your ecosystem. Now, before concluding, I just want to say it wouldn't be fair to claim that it is only the women's entrepreneurs' responsibility to render themselves more investable, right? And to not be at the risk of stating the obvious, I'm not going to talk about the gender biases, the stereotypes held by some investors that can influence their decision to invest, or how some investors might require more stringent conditions and requirements from women-led initiatives in comparison with their male counterparts. But I am going to talk about how, yes, we understand that it is the lack of data and the success metrics on impact businesses and the majority of women entrepreneurs driving those businesses that unfortunately renders the investment decision negative in women entrepreneurs. So to that I ask, what have we done about the lack of data on women-led initiatives? It seems to me that there is a problem. And as I mentioned early on, there's also an opportunity. There's an opportunity to innovate and to create holistic solutions when it comes to this. And so when I hear that Vital Voices Global Partnership, the nonprofit venture catalyst that has been empowering women leaders, entrepreneurs in every field around the globe, building a network of 20,000 women over the span of 25 years, lending them a network of resources to grow their initiatives. When I hear that they are embarking on starting a $100 million impact fund, I, as an impact investor, I'm happy. I trust their vetting process. I trust their data. I trust their 25-year record and monitoring performance metrics. It makes me actually optimistic, not just because of Vital Voices, but because we are taking concrete data-driven approach to performance standards that would be essential in reducing the gender funding gap in the near future. So my call today is to direct women entrepreneurs with a motive to make a difference, to seek impact conscious investors, to the impact investors out there to align and to invest in impact funds with data records and vetting process as that of Vital Voices $100 million impact fund, to the investment community for us to come together and put a standard performance metrics on women-led initiatives and advise academic finance programs to redefine traditional conventional profit and return business terms in light of the global shift that we're seeing towards impact, and to governments to incentivize investments in impact businesses. Tax incentives, tax credits, deductions, they will go a long way, and witness the money flow to women-led startups, reducing the gender funding gap in the process. Thank you so very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Rasha. And I'm so happy that you brought two important points. One about a conscious investor. and the other one is about the data. Because on this panel, we have many conscious investors, and it'll be our pleasure to introduce them to you. And data is one of the cornerstones of the PowerUp program that we're going to talk about later. And so on that note, it's my pleasure to introduce our venture partner in Africa, Pauline Kerbel. And on a personal note, when we met in September last year to talk about PowerUp and to talk about her work on Africa continent, we decided to team together to make a difference for African female entrepreneurs. And in case you didn't know, 40% of entrepreneurs in Africa are females, and this is the biggest percentage worldwide. And it's a pleasure for me to introduce Pauline. She's actually representing 3 continents here, as she's born in Africa, and then she lived in the US and now lives in Switzerland. Pauline is a founder of Shequity, a gender lens investment firm whose purpose is to close the gender funding gap in Africa. Shequity takes an investment ecosystem approach to investing and has its own accelerator, Shequity Business Accelerator, which focuses on de-risking impactful, innovative, and scalable female-owned and led businesses in Africa. Shequity aims for triple bottom line profit combined with positive impact on people and the planet. Shequity's founder, Pauline, has spent 20 plus years in venture philanthropy and international development, 10 plus years supporting African entrepreneurs and innovators, SMEs, and startups, deal sourcing, conducting due diligence and fundraising, 5 years of real estate investing. Pauline is a recipient of the 2022 Meaningful Awards from the United Nations. Pauline, it is my pleasure to give you a chance to share your thoughts on your work and on how we can bridge the gender funding gap.
Thank you so much, Victoria, for having me here. Hello, everyone. It's really a great pleasure to be here and to be having this conversation. And as I mentioned before when we were chatting earlier, I'm even more excited about actions that this conversation can trigger. So, Rasha, thanks so much for painting a global picture. So what I would like to do is to zoom into Africa. And for some of you who've never been to Africa or been to one country in Africa, you know Africa has about 54 countries or 55, depending on which political, map you use. So you might wonder why invest in Africa and why invest in African women? If you are in the US, in Australia, in Germany, why should you care about what's happening in Africa? So I'm here to tell you, actually, investing in Africa, it's a smart business because Africa is the world's fast growing continent and has the youngest population in the world. Right now, about 70% of sub-Saharan African are under age of 30. So again, if you live in Asia and other markets, like one of the key challenges is aging population. We don't have this problem in Africa. Why women? In Africa, as Victoria mentioned, women play a catalytic role across a key sector, including agriculture and healthcare, and they operate about 40% of small and medium enterprise. However, the existing gender biases make it difficult for them to access investment that they need to grow and scale their businesses. So you will assume that because there's a lot of talk about gender and the gender funding gap and the impact of investing in women, that this gap will be reducing, but no. Actually, in 2022, all female founders only receive around 2% of total funding that went to Africa. So this was around $5.4 billion US, comparing it to 85% that went to all male founders. And this despite the fact that actually the research shows that women-owned and managed startups deliver higher revenue, at least about 2.5% so in a sense, multiple, that's, basically comparing it to what men will, deliver. So if you give $1 to a man and you give $1 to a woman, actually the research show that women will bring you at least 2.5 back. And also, a McKinsey report estimates that around 316 billion US dollars could be added to African GDP by 2025 if the gender funding gap is closed. So when you look at the research around the GDP of African countries today, this the most recent statistic. So this basically, it's kind of a combined GDP of Kenya, Ethiopia, Ghana, and Rwanda combined today. So that's how much money we're losing by keeping the gender funding gap around in Africa. So my why really behind investing in women and setting up Share Equity, it's linked to what my personal story. So I'm an African woman who was born and raised in Rwanda, and I left actually during the genocide, where I have to run, and then at the end I find a home in different countries, including US. And a lot of people actually supported me in a way that they enabled me. So they didn't try just to feed me, help me survive. They gave me tools. So I set up Share Equity to pay it forward, because I believe that if we can actually close the gender funding gap in Africa, which is again a huge opportunity for everyone who's looking to make financial return and have impact on the people and the planet, it's a win-win for everyone. So as Victoria mentioned, Share Equity is an early stage gender lens fund. We focus on innovative, scalable, impactful female-led and owned businesses that are operating in the sub-Saharan African market. We're not in the business of helping anyone. We are in the business of tapping into untapped potential, because African women are underfunded, which in essence is defeating the purpose for all the work everyone is trying to do to achieve the committed goals for sustainable development goals in Africa. So through Share Equity, we have right now invested in about 9 companies. So we are very young. Invested in 9 companies through our pilot fund. Also supported about 90 women through our accelerator, which we use as a pipeline, a de-risking for our investors. And most importantly, the startup we support have impacted around 30 million lives across sub-Saharan Africa. And again, that's clearly the impact of investing in women. Those women have not just created jobs, have not just hired other people, address issues that everyone is facing, but they also had impact on the community. So we are now raising the next round of fund to scale what we started. And I'm really convinced that closing the gender funding gap in Africa requires investment firms such as Share Equity, with a diverse leadership and investment team that understand the cultures and environment where investment are being made. And as an African woman myself with a global exposure, I know that African women are not asking for a handout, but they're asking for access to capital to grow and scale their businesses. And I am convinced that investing in women is not a charity, but it's smart businesses. So lastly, I want to end by quoting Mackenzie, who says that what is good for gender equality is good for economy and society as well. So I'm hoping that after this conversation, we can all go back and say, how do we work together to really tap into this untapped potential, which has a huge impact on people on the planet, not just only on your bank account. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Pauline. It's very inspiring to hear you talk about everything that you're doing for Africa. And in terms of actions, we are going to be sending next steps to everybody after this call about what each of you can do to participate, whether you're an investor, whether you're a government representative, whether you're a founder, or whether you're just somebody who cares about the cause. There is a place for you to do something. And only by joining forces together can we make a nodal. And here, if you're interested in a specific region, you can choose your partners to learn more about the region and how you can get involved. And it is my pleasure to move to the next region around the globe, which is the Middle East. And I'm so excited to say that it's because of Russia that I had an opportunity to meet Tamara, and Pam had an opportunity to meet Tamara. And then we're now working together to launch PowerUp in Jordan and to help women of the Middle East to make their dreams come true. Tamara Abdel Jaber is a partner at Amam Ventures, a genderless investment fund and accelerator that caters to businesses that are committed to equality, those that put women in front and focus on specifically serving women in Jordan and MENA. As the founder and chief executive at Palma Consulting. She's an expert in strategy design and execution, business and digital transformation. She currently serves as the past chair of the Global Institute of Certified Management Consultants, as well as board member at the International Council of Management Consulting Institutes and several other companies. Tamara has been ranked at number 39 of 100 most powerful Arab women in 2011, included in the Arabian Business in its list of Power 500 most influential Arabs in 2011-2013, and recognized by Forbes Middle East as one of the 200 most powerful Arab women for 2014. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the stage now and talk about what's happening in the Middle East, as well as your thoughts on actions that we can take.
Thank you, Victoria. It's an honor for me to be among you all as thought leaders and tell you what the funding gap looks like in the Middle East region, especially in Jordan, and how we are working diligently to create and implement solutions to address that gap. One of the early signs that I started seeing, of course, after having been operating my business for a few years across the region, was when looking at the business that one of my partners had started. She's a serial tech entrepreneur, and for 10 years, a few years back, she was only one of 3 Jordanian women to raise Series A funding for her business. And that's a very dark image to think of. In 2019, the Middle East had 14% women-owned SMEs, and less than 5% had access to finance. Another data point was that the global market for impact investing was estimated at $1.16 trillion in 2022. The share for the Middle East was less than 2%. In Jordan, we have close to 200,000 small and medium-sized companies. Less than 20% of those have female founders, and only 3% are solely owned by women, and only 5% of those have access to bank financing. Another data point was, according to Magnet's research, in 2022, startups in the Middle East have raised close to $4 billion. Less than 1.5% went to all-female teams, and less than 3% went to mixed teams. And the focus was mostly fintech, where very few women tend to start businesses. Another sad data point is the 2023 World Economic Forum's Gender Gap Report, looking at the performance of countries like Jordan and Egypt. When it comes to women's economic participation, we're actually declining. This means that it's not just the gender gap. There's so much that needs to be done to help address not just the access to finance, but gender gaps in every aspect of economic participation for women. Back in 2017, my friend and I had started a virtual community for women across the Middle East region, the aim of which was to bring together a small group of women who are willing to mentor other women business owners. We called it Women in Business Arabia. And those friends invited their friends, and the friends invited their friends. And now we have more than 45,000 women from across the MENA region. More than 25% of those are business owners. We've used that community, which was recognized by Facebook as one of the most active in the region, to screen the businesses that are part of this community. We screened more than 400 businesses. We realized that those businesses and women tended to cluster in education and edutainment, healthcare and well-being, food and beverage, manufacturing, creative and design, not a lot in technology. And hence, those businesses do not fit the VC model, the typical VC model. They're too small for private equity. And because they don't have collaterals, they don't have access to bank financing, which meant that those businesses remained small. Further analysis got us to see that those businesses have never talked to investors before. They're low when it comes to financial literacy or financial confidence, and even their self-confidence needed a lot of support. Hence, we realized that we have a responsibility, not just a need, to create a gender lens investment fund. And not only that, that fund had to be coupled together with an accelerator and an incubator, because we needed to create a stronger pipeline of women-owned businesses. When we started studying what gender lens investing, I'm coming from a management consulting background. My partner is in tech entrepreneurship, and our third partner comes from a typical VC world. So we needed to learn about gender lens investing. And this is where we saw that this is investing with the intent to address gender issues or promote gender equality. We came across the 2X challenge, and we realized that since we are a first-time fund management team, we're an all-female fund management team, we are introducing instruments that are new to the region. We are looking at supporting women who own SMEs and not just tech startups. We needed to be as vanilla as possible when it comes to our gender lens, and that's why we use the 2X criteria to design the lens. Now, we all also know that for a fact that investors tend to more likely interrogate female founders' business projections and ask questions around downside risk. As a result, female founders lower their business projections and their valuations and are less ambitious in their pitches. Early bets are taken on showmanship and confidence. We see female entrepreneurs pitching in a way that they almost want to underpromise and overperform. And I think that comes largely from being, in a lot of cases, they are intimidated because they are the only women in the room. It's just one woman in the room. And although research shows that businesses founded by women ultimately deliver better and higher revenues and are generally regarded as lower risk, or they actually are lower risk, they are regarded as high risk. One thing that we realized is a big barrier is that there are not enough women among investors. Venture capital is still dominated by male investors betting on startups led by men. We saw that we, as first-time all-female fund management teams, are seeing the same challenges every day when we are fundraising for our own fund. So the challenges are out there regardless of your role when it comes to fundraising. So for all those reasons, we decided that we needed to start Amam Ventures as an impact fund that caters to companies that are committed to diversity and equal opportunities and those that put women in front. We invest through the gender lens in order for us to make inclusion our key driving force in our quest to put more women towards the front in SMEs and startups in Jordan and the Middle East region. We've been investing through different sectors, mostly traditional brick and mortar SMEs, because we realize that, like I said, this is where more women exist. But we are also targeting tech-enabled businesses that are led by incredible founders that have identified expansion opportunities and need risk capital to grow. Like I said, those companies typically do not fit the VC model. And those entrepreneurs need more than just capital to succeed. We decided to extend our financial support through quasi-equity instruments such as non-dilutive revenue-based financing, because those businesses, they don't want to give up equity. They're looking for non-dilutive options. But we also started the accelerator and incubator, where we are implementing technical assistance programs to help women learn how to grow their businesses, to address the investment readiness challenge, to address the financial literacy challenge, and create a pipeline that's investable for us as a fund, but also for the general ecosystem. And that's why we're implementing our programs, not only in Jordan, but also in Egypt. And we started 2.5 years ago, so we're still very new, but we're already seeing positive impact with our portfolio companies in terms of increased revenues, increased job opportunities, but also increased valuations for the tech-enabled businesses that we're investing in. Rasha also mentioned the lack of data, and that's a big point in the Middle East. It's also another area where Amam Ventures is trying to have an impact by partnering with global players such as UBS and Endeavor to develop research on women as entrepreneurs and investors. In terms of takeaways, we see that despite all the attention to gender equality and women's empowerment around us, we are nowhere near making a serious dent. Like I said, according to the Gender Gap Report, we're actually going backwards. So that's why governments, IFIs, DFIs, funds, investors, the private sector, and the civil society need to get together to work on designing catalytic financing approaches The old instruments do not work anymore. We need something new. So we have an influential role in steering the ecosystem and incentivizing improvements in corporate cultures and business environments that encourage alignment and investment towards SDGs. We need to work together towards addressing the challenges, sharing best practices, accelerating the use of gender-smart financing frameworks to unleash potential in Jordan, the region, and globally. And that's why today's convening is extremely important for me. In 2030, personally, I dream that all institutional investors are diverse internally and also diverse in their investments, that investors are equitably funding women fund managers, and all fund managers have a gender lens integrated into their work. So that's it from my side. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tamara. And I want to say that we're seeing this theme here where in both Africa and the Middle East, our fund managers have created a support system for female entrepreneurs to help them succeed. In both cases, it's a combination of a fund plus an accelerator. And we'll be interested to see if this is what's happening in other sectors of the world too. And now I'm going to pass to Steve to present our other three speakers. Steve?
Thank you so much, Victoria. Yes, and I completely echo your sentiments. We're having so many great learnings here today. So it is my pleasure to now introduce our next luminary, Briony Cooper, who I've known for quite a while. Briony is the managing partner of Arkley Brink VC. Arkley Brink VC is a fund investing in early-stage tech startups in Poland and Europe. Briony has co-founded 3 tech companies, and all this by the age of 30, including T-Dispatch, which is a SaaS smart mobility solution for fleet management that raised $2 million. Briony is the former CEO of venture builder IXDS Labs, based in Berlin, and led Brink's IoT and connected hardware accelerator for the MENA region in Bahrain. As an advocate for diversity and gender parity, Briony regularly mentors startup founders and was featured in the book Dear Female Founder, a series of letters to the future generation of women entrepreneurs. Following an earlier career as a professional singer, you'll also find Briony fronting BC and the VCs, which I love that name, a live band of tech startup founders and investors. Briony, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for that lovely introduction, Steve, and thank you for having me here today. It's so wonderful to be in this lineup with such inspirational women and to hear different perspectives from around the world. So let me tell you a little bit about how the scene is in Europe. I'm from the UK originally, but I've been living in Berlin, Germany for the last 10 years, apart from my brief stint in Bahrain, as Steve mentioned, to run an accelerator program. And my fund currently is based in Poland, in Warsaw. So I'm there quite often for business, and I've been able to establish my own businesses and also support other founders establish businesses in all 3 of those countries. And it's been really interesting as well to move around some different places in the world and see how the society there actually approaches diversity and inclusion and how women founders are treated and what kind of programs and incentives are out there. So I'd love to touch on some of those today. Also, as Steve mentioned, I come from a bit of an unconventional background because the first 7 years of my professional life, sorry, I'll just put my camera back on. I was a professional singer and I studied creative writing. So I've never come from a finance background. I don't have an MBA. In fact, I'm one of these university dropouts. After 2 years, I dropped out to run my first startup because I had this burning entrepreneurial spirit and just wanted to chase that dream. So I think it's important for any women that are out there that maybe feel like they don't exactly fit the mold or they don't have the industrial experience they think they need. It doesn't matter as long as you have the passion and the drive and you're willing to dive in the deep end. Yeah, you can do that. So it's been quite a wild ride. So let me give you a quick look at how the European ecosystem is right now. One of my observations from living in Berlin is that Berlin, I think, likes to think of itself as pretty progressive compared to some other places in the world. However, when you look at the statistics and the data, it's actually not particularly far ahead when it comes to investing into female-led startups. So you have much better chances when you actually have a mixed team with, men and women co-founding the company or on the management team. When you can get up to about 17% of total VC invested. But when it comes to women-only teams, it's still below 2%, like it has been everywhere else in the world for the last 10 years without much change. And in fact, in the last year, it actually went down a little bit. So having experienced personally what it feels like to be a female founder in Berlin, and having experienced certain amounts of sexism and false assumptions about yourself firsthand, there's definitely still some work to do and some way to go. So I wanted to take this opportunity to highlight some of the programs. Some of these I've had some involvement with through pro bono mentoring, for example, or through speaking or hosting workshops. And other ones are just ones that are on my radar that I think if you're a woman running a startup or a woman in leadership in Europe, it's great for you to know about these. And also I just wanted to link back to what Tamara was saying about confidence. I teach a lot about pitching. I think because of my background as a singer as well, I'm more comfortable on the stage than some people might be. Confidence will get you so far, in my experience. I think that's a big difference that we see between men and women, that men, whether it's warranted or not, will come and pitch with so much confidence and instantly have the audience or the investor's attention. And I honestly think that's why I was able to raise money on my first ever pitch when I started this journey 15 years ago, because I walked out there with confidence. So if that's something that you can get access to resources to actually help you work on your pitch and hone that, I think it can get you a really long way. So to shine a light on some of these incentives in Europe and some of the programs that you can access, things like Founderland, for example, has got actually an accelerator program and a community. And this is specifically for women of color. So of course, these are women that are facing the most discrimination and find it the hardest to raise capital. So that's very specific. FemGems, which is the community where I offer one-to-one mentoring, is a community program that will help you with education, with introducing you to people with specific skill sets that you might need, and also opening up its network and community and hosting events. Then you've got accelerator programs like She's Innovation Academy, which is based in Poland. And they had their demo day just last week, where I was a keynote speaker at the Perspective Women in Tech Summit.
Brioni, just to cut you off for a second, I believe you may not be sharing the right tab. We only see the eco screen. If you're sharing.
Thank you. Let me check again. So I just stopped sharing and now I'm going to try again. So it should be.
And while Brioni is doing it, we will be sure to share the resources that Brioni is mentioning in a follow-up email to all the attendees. So those who are based in Europe can check out those organizations and see how they can get help if they are founders and looking for some additional support.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm happy to share these slides. Can you see the logos on my screen now?
I know we cannot see anything.
Okay, in that case, I'm going to give up trying to share my screen and I'll just tell you about it. So let me put my camera back on so at least you can see me.
We can see you.
Okay, yes, perfect. All right, so I'll just carry on telling you about a couple of incentives. And as Victoria said, I'm happy to share the links to all of these organizations later. So as well as these ones, there's also some public and private incentives that we have. So for example, the European Innovation Council on the public side is running funds for women innovators, and you can get up to about 100,000 euros. So a lot of these programs are focused on very early stage, kind of pre-seed to seed funding, but they are incentives specifically looking for women founders or for women-led companies. Also, I just wanted to highlight 3 venture capital funds that are actually putting their money where their mouth is, which I think is important, because what I see these days in the ecosystem as well is a lot of people maybe talk the talk but are not walking the walk. So a couple of these funds that I've come across recently that I was really happy to see actually are putting their money where their mouth is. One of them is Lenox Impact Capital. And actually Rasha at the beginning was talking about impact funding. And this is as well a correlation that I have noticed, that a lot of women are running impact startups, and impact funds are actually putting more of a focus on investing into women. So Lenox Impact Capital has the goal of making sure that 50% of their portfolio founders are female, but also 50% of their investors and shareholders are female. So that's great to see. There's another one called Fund F, which is a pre-seed VC. The end of last year, they just raised a 20 million euro fund, and they're focusing on gender diverse and women-led teams. And they cover things like climate tech, health tech, fintech, and HR tech, for example. So here we are seeing much more technology-driven companies and startups. And the other one I wanted to mention was ORCSO, which is the Female Catalyst Fund. And they're pre-seed to seed VC. And they actually have a target of 54% plus of female-founded or female co-founded companies. And on top of that, it's run by an all-women team. So it's really great to see that there are actually some new funds that are successfully fundraising, that are focusing on investing in women. I think as well as looking at the startup ecosystem and looking at the venture capital funds that we have here, there's a lot of women in leadership roles as well that also play a big part of how this ecosystem works, and how being a woman in the workplace or a woman in leadership is so important to make sure that you are tackling diversity and inclusion, because unfortunately even the women can be part of the problem, because we've all grown up within these structures and within these systems that have been built for men. So I was really happy to see that last month there was a book published called Mind the Inclusion Gap. This is also linked in my slides that you can't see, so you'll find a link to the book. And it's actually talking about some practical know-how of how allies can bridge the divide between talking about diversity and taking action. And I think this is a hurdle where a lot of people in leadership are tripping up. They maybe have good intentions and they want to help and they want to, create an equitable workplace, but don't actually know how to do that or have the tools to do so. So it was great to see a book coming out that's tackling that exactly, that was written by Susie Levy, who was running diversity and inclusion for Accenture, which is, of course, a huge corporation. And it has a personal note as well, because my sister's one of the stories that's been included as a case study. So I was really happy to see this getting into people's hands. And the other book I just flashed at you earlier, this one called Dear Female Founder. Victoria was talking at the beginning about how it's also important to have inspiration, to have role models to look up to. So this is a collection of stories from successful women founders and entrepreneurs, and hopefully some relatable stories as well that you can look at. And I was one of the stories featured in there, but it's actually a few years old now. So I have many more stories. I hope they will have another edition coming out maybe, because there's so much more to share since then. But yeah, I think that's about all I'd like to share right now, but I'm happy to stick around for any questions at the end as well.
Thank you so much, Brioni. I really want to check out those books too and add them to my bookshelf. So let's see. We also have here with us Jackie Bloom, joining us all the way from Australia. So Jackie is the Growth and Investment Director at Startup Bootcamp. She's a seasoned entrepreneur with over 25 years of experience starting and scaling businesses. Her career has seen her travel the globe in business development and executive operational roles, predominantly fostering and nurturing relationships. Having worked on and in numerous ventures, Jackie now focuses her energy on ventures that are purpose-driven in nature and is committed to making a difference and impacting the lives of others. Jackie has mentored inmates in prison, volunteered on philanthropic committees, is an active member of numerous female enterprises, and is passionate about growing
Steve, you cut out, so I'm going to continue.
And advises startups and ventures further into the foundation, capital, and investment space. Jackie, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Steve and Victoria, for that fabulous introduction. We did lose a little bit at the end, but that's okay. We managed, right? That's technology for you. Yes, Vicky, it is 2 a.m. in Australia right now. So I'm trying to, look as glamorous as possible. But hey, that's what this whole gender bias and discrimination goes against, right? So makeup free, here we are at 2 a.m. I thank you so much for having me here. I really appreciate the invite, and I'm very humbled to be presenting sensation, with such sensational women. What I'd love to present to you today is a little bit different from a perspective of a bit more of a story, but also I'm not going to present too many statistics, because we all know that the stats, thank you, ladies who have shared prior to me speaking, but the stats are abhorrent, and we know, we are all aware now of the gap and the funding gap for female founders, and it is global. It doesn't discriminate. So from my perspective, as Steve mentioned, my background has very much come from small to medium enterprise, and most recently as a female founder myself. And I learnt, I certainly feel like I made every mistake in the book, and I swore I would never do that. And I said, no, I know how to do this. I can run businesses. I'm a woman in my 40s. I've got children. I know what I'm doing, right? But at the end of the day, I got my business off the ground, my startup off the ground. I didn't manage to scale it, but what I did manage to do was recognize when to stop and when to walk away. And so I was really grateful for that. And I was really grateful for the learnings that I had through that. And what, same like Briony, a very unconventional pathway through to startup land and through to community, but also I then switched sides and started focusing on the investment side of the startup community. And one thing to note is that Australia, whilst we are working hard on bridging these gaps, we are really far behind in terms of investment comparatively to the rest of the world for early stage startups. I think that there was a statistic, I said I wouldn't quote stats, but there was a statistic that came out last week, and I believe Australia ranks something like 67th in the world per capita for funding for startups and investment. So that paints a picture of, whilst Australia is still on the map, and I've been part of this ecosystem for the last 6 or 7 years, we are growing in waves, but in actual fact, we still have so far to come comparatively to the rest of the world. Having said that, there are some extraordinary focus groups who are focusing on female founders who are looking to help bridge that gap. We have a number of funds that are now available for female founders, but they're small. We have a couple that are $5 million funds. We have a couple that are $10 million funds, but they are small. Again, comparatively to the rest of the world. But we all have to start somewhere. And part of my journey is I'm a mother of two boys. And what's really apparent to me is I've been a member of lots of different female groups and female-led groups, and very much a strong narrative around how do we help the funding gap and how do we improve it. And what became a real disconnect for me was that there are so many female-led groups that are women working with women and excluding men on the journey. And my message and my takeaway from that is we cannot solve discrimination with discrimination. It's never going to work. So my message is we need to bring men on this journey together with us so that we can do this together. And my mantra is we can't do it alone, but we can certainly do it together. And so my little story for you is when I was working on a business called Shepreneur, which was all about funding female founders, but it was bringing men on the journey, and it was advisory, it was mentoring, but it was also helping raise capital. And I had a meeting with a fabulous lady who is absolutely a champion for female founders. And we were talking about investment, and we were talking about investment into a company that actually was not 100% female owned or led. It was 50% female led and 50% male led. And she said to me, Jackie, I really have a problem with this. I have a problem with who's on the cap table because, and who's sitting in the director's chair because, well, it's not 100% female owned or led. And I said, well, and I won't name any names, but this story resonates with me, and it has never, ever left me. And I don't believe it ever will, because it was a really pivotal moment for me. But she said, yeah, it just doesn't resonate with me to invest when really what I want to do is focus on female founders and invest into female founders and help propel them. And I turned around to her and I said, I'm going to call her Victoria because I love Victoria. No, let's say Victoria. I said to her, let me ask you, are you a mother? And she said, yes, I am. And I said, do you have boys or girls? And she said, I have one of each. And I said, and do you have a partner? And she said, yes, I do. I'm married to a man. And I turned around to her and I said, well, I'm a mum of 2 boys. And I have a beautiful partner who supports me, and he's wonderful in every way. And I said to her, so are you telling me that if I, as an investor, if I make money on or returns whilst helping female founders, but I make returns on female found or female-led companies, that I shouldn't share that with my children because they're white men? And I shouldn't share that and the lifestyle with my partner because he's a white male? And conversely, are you suggesting that this white male who has a daughter and has a wife, are you suggesting that he shouldn't educate his daughter with the proceeds that he receives from his investments, and that he shouldn't share a lifestyle with his children or his daughter and his wife because he's a male? And she said, oh, I've never thought about it like that. And I said, and therein lies part of the problem. We cannot solve this on our own. We can't choose to fight women or to fight men because of something that probably 90% of them had nothing to do with in their lifetime, but it happened from generations before them. So there's 2 things I'm incredibly passionate about. And that is, one is focusing on female founders and helping them change the narrative, but education. And education from the bottom up and education from the top down. It is my children we need to educate. It is their younger brothers and sisters. It has to start at an early age, and we have to share the narrative at an early age. From the top down approach, we're all here. We are the ones who are going to be those change makers, and we are going to send those messages down. We're also the ones who are going to propel ourselves into investor and investment opportunities where we can make a difference for female founders. And we're going to support incredible female founders along the way. And we're going to bring men on that journey with us. So thank you, Victoria, and thank you, Clarence, for having me here. Again, incredibly proud to be part of this group, and happy to help in any way I can. Thank you.
And everybody, we're going to be running over by about 15 minutes because we still have our amazing speaker, and then introduce PowerUp, and then we shall revert with our action steps after Steve. Please go forward.
Absolutely, and that was amazing, Jackie. Thank you so much. So our last speaker is Joanne Gann, the head of impact investing and ESG treasury of PayPal, where she oversees its investment commitments to advance racial and gender equity. Joanne cares deeply about building a more inclusive global economy and has spent more than a decade in impact and community development investing, spanning asset classes, geographies, and sectors. Prior to PayPal, Joanne was a vice president in Deutsche Bank's Community Development Finance Group, where she led its program-related investment and private equity fund portfolios. She was a founding team member of Bridges US Sustainable Growth Fund, a private equity fund focused on the education, healthcare, and sustainability sectors. Earlier in her career, Joanne was a portfolio manager at Kiva, where she led its relationships with microfinance institutions and social enterprises in the Asia Pacific region. She began her career as a credit analyst at Lehman Brothers and Barclays Capital. Joanne holds a master's in management science and engineering and a BA in economics and international relations from Stanford University. Joanne, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Steve, and thanks, Victoria and Hemp, for having me here today. It's wonderful to be here to talk about gender gaps with this amazing panel and global panel. I'm especially excited to follow an Aussie. I'm a Kiwi based in New York and obviously working for a global fintech company. As Steve mentioned, I manage impact investing and ESG within PayPal's Treasury division. And in this role, I oversee $500 million of capital that PayPal has dedicated to advancing racial equity within the US and advancing gender equality globally. And so I offer a different vantage point from my fellow speakers. And really am coming to this conversation from the perspective of the corporate. PayPal as a company has a mission of democratizing access to financial services, making financial services and commerce more affordable, convenient, and secure for everyone through our digital payments platform. And we're really committed to building a more inclusive financial system and economy where everyone has the opportunity to thrive. We believe that as a company, we have a responsibility to promote the role of women in the financial system and advance economic equity through our platform, through our resources and tools. And as has been spoken about today, there are significant gender gaps in the venture ecosystem, as well as broader capital access to women. Women make up the majority of the global unbanked population. And according to the IFC, there's a $300 billion gap for female-owned small businesses. So what are we as a company doing to promote gender equality? PayPal is the private sector lead. This is a mouthful, so I apologize in advance. We are the private sector lead for the Economic Justice and Rights Action Coalition of the UN Women's Generation Equality Forum. And as part of that, in 2021, we made a commitment of $108 million to advance financial inclusion and economic empowerment for women and girls by 2026. This includes several different initiatives going on at the company, including $7 million that we've committed in partnerships to increase access to microloans for women entrepreneurs around the world. It also includes $1 million that we've also committed to raise awareness and provide incentives to mobilize donations to civil society organizations promoting gender equality through PayPal's giving platform. And finally, and the piece of capital that I manage, it includes a $100 million commitment into investments that promote women's economic empowerment and financial inclusion, including funds that are led by women or focused on serving women. So in my day-to-day job, I'm constantly thinking about how we close funding gaps and how we close gender funding gaps. And the thing that always comes back to me is how are we building a more inclusive financial system? One of the things that we think about a lot is who are the gatekeepers of capital and how do we make that system more representative of the broader economy? Under our racial equity commitment, which we call the Economic Opportunity Fund, PayPal has allocated $100 million into venture capital funds run by Black and Latinx GPs in the US, a quarter of which are also women-led. And those funds have invested in nearly $300 million in over 250 portfolio companies. And what we've seen is that 55% of those portfolio companies have at least one minority founder, and 50% have at least one female founder. So investing in diverse fund managers is really increasing capital access for diverse founders. The second recommendation that I wanted to leave you with today, and that Tamara also touched on earlier, is really one about adopting a gender lens in your investing. And I think that this can be done whether you are an impact investor, like the seat that I'm sitting in, or whether you're a traditional investor. Earlier this year, PayPal became a member of 2X Global, and we've adopted the 2X criteria, which is really helping us think critically about how we're creating value for women across the value chain through our investments. And so that 2X criteria really helps us think about women as business leaders and CEOs, as owners of funds and of companies, as employees, the majority of us are employees, and as customers. And so with that, let me turn it back to Victoria. It's wonderful being with you all today.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for all the panelists. And we've really gone around the globe, if you haven't noticed, because we started in the US with Russia, and then we went to Africa and the Middle East and Australia and Europe, and then come back to the US. And 2 hour speakers for the US were speaking globally. And so this was done on purpose, because it's only by encompassing the globe and by meeting the people in different regions, we're all doing the same things, that we can achieve anything. And now I'd like to pass it to Steve so that he can talk, he can introduce us, and we're going to introduce PowerUp as one of the actions that can be taken to bridge the gender funding gap.
With pleasure. Would love to do so. Just give me 1 second here. I'll bring this up here. Okay, so everybody, I think by now knows about the great Victoria Yampolsky, president and founder of the Startup Station, CFO advisory and finance education platform for startups and small businesses. Victoria is a serial entrepreneur, mentor for early stage startups, a strategic CFO, and an expert in financial modeling and valuation. The Startup Station has helped more than 150 founders from 15 plus industries and has helped them raise $50 million plus in venture capital. More than 1,000 founders have taken the Startup Station's courses to learn the basics of accounting, valuation, financial modeling, and startup financing. Victoria also teaches at the Bank of America Institute of Women's Entrepreneurship at Cornell University. And her co-founder, Clarence Hampton III, is an experienced C-suite executive and a serial entrepreneur. Hamp is a 3-time startup CEO with 2 exits. He's the CRO for 2 tech companies that scaled from $10 million to $50 million, respectively. National sales director for a privately held medical marketing company that grew the business 30% annually until the company went IPO. Hamp is also adjunct professor for MBA program for entrepreneurs at the Metropolitan College of New York. And with that, I'm going to turn the forum over to Victoria and Hamp to talk about PowerUp.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And we're all talked about here about the specific actions that can be taken in order to bridge the gender funding gap. And we're here to present you with one of such alternatives called PowerUp, which is a new groundbreaking initiative targeting seed-level female adventurers that have just raised their first round of financing and looking to scale. This program is going to help these founders scale, raise the next round of capital, and produce the next generation of female entrepreneurs that feel limitless, bold, that feel that anything is possible. There are 5 elements that make our program unique and sets apart from all other programs out there. Number 1, program length. Our program lasts for 2 years as opposed to 3 or 6 months, because that's the time that it takes to raise the next round of capital. And we want to create a support environment for the entrepreneurs for the entirety of this time. Second, focus. Our program is only focused on strategic sales and financial planning, because that's the gap in expertise that founders face in this stage. It's implemented as a combination of an initial bootcamp during which we put together a 2-year roadmap for companies to scale and then fundraise, as well as 7 quarterly check-ins to make sure that they stay on track. Third, mindset. We've talked here about the confidence gap that we see between men and women. Part of our program, and a critical part of our program, are executive weekly group coaching sessions. In the sessions, the entrepreneurs will come together to form a support group where they can share their successes and talk about their challenges, but also learn about psychology, about how our brains work, about some conscious biases, and how to change some of our thinking to become the best leaders we can be. 4, a global network of PowerUp ambassadors that already represents 25 countries on 5 continents. Some of these ambassadors are on the panel, some of these ambassadors in the audience. These are entrepreneurs, investors, academics, philanthropists, and business leaders deeply committed to the cause of bridging the gender funding gap. It's with these ambassadors that we're going to improve visibility of the companies in our program to investors, as well as make it easier for companies to expand internationally. And finally, and it's been mentioned by several speakers on the panel, is data. By collecting data, as we run this program worldwide, every time we have a boot camp and every time we have a quarterly assessment, we'll produce a clear indication of the track record of execution that will help change perception of risk that investing community may have of investing in female adventures. And with that, I'm going to pass it to my dear co-founder, Ham, to talk about other elements of our program.
It is really hard to follow Victoria, as all of you know, but I'll try. She and I work very well together, and I think one of the reasons is because we're kind of two sides of the coin. And to Victoria's point, and I'll bring in a little bit from what everybody said on the panel, I'll start with Jackie. And when you're talking about it can't be in a vacuum, where you have to have a collegial environment with men. So Victoria and I kind of represent that example of this dichotomy of financial modeling and being able to scale and go to market in an effective way. And Rasha was talking about the fact that the perception of change and how you kind of have a ripple effect. Well, the networking effect behind PowerUp, I think, is one of the undefined jewels that we want to do, whether it's investors like Joanne, or in the case of Tamara, or in Pauline, or we find companies that have reached a certain level and we want to help them. How do we find them? Well, this is the network effect. If you're a founder and you want to export to Germany and you know nothing about the EU, you can now call a founder who's in Germany through, Brioni or whoever, and here we go. Vice versa. Pauline mentioned the fact of looking at the obvious and seeing a different conclusion, meaning that why is African women important? Victoria talked about the staggering percentage of businesses started by women in Africa. That's out of necessity because there's not a job opportunity that they can get well paid. So the economic effect of what we want to do with PowerUp is we're creating jobs. This is an economic indicator of saying that we're going to create jobs. And we're going to do that because, as Victoria said, we designed a 2-year model because she and I consult with founders all the time. And what we saw systemically is that about 18 months, either you're going to run out of cash and you crash on the rocks, or you've built a sustainable business that's scalable, that's solving problems, that has referenceable clients, that you're in a position then to get your next round of funding and go from there. That's how you scale. People used to ask me all the time about scaling businesses, and what I used to tell them, it isn't magic, but it is systemic. And there are 3 components to that Victoria and I wrote into the plan for PowerUp. So what we want to do is we want to start with a pilot in a country. So for example, in Africa, we're working with Pauline on several companies in her cohort that represent different countries in Africa. With Tamara, we're going to start in Jordan. And hopefully with Jackie, we're going to start, down under and have cohorts there. Typically it's 10 to 12. And then we take them through this 2-year program that Victoria talked about. The other thing is we're going to then start and multiply that and have 3 going as soon as we do the pilot. And now we have 30 to 36 cohorts that are developing that. And the whole idea is that if they're successful at the end of the 2-year period, they reach out a hand and they sponsor another company to join the cohort and start this over again. So we're replenishing that element, if you will. And so how can everybody help? Pauline mentioned about action. So one is that if you're an investor, take a look at helping sponsor us, or look at cohort companies you can introduce to the system, or find us other sponsors in the region to help augment what we're doing, whether it's other VC firms, whether it's large law firms that can have assets that they can devote to this, or et cetera. Second, we want to be able to get active in promoting on social media. You heard from Victoria and I as we were doing all kinds of promotions about the event here. Let's get active and start networking with people and start to build momentum in the areas of the world we're going to do this. So again, Jordan in Africa, down under, we want to start these programs before the end of this year. So taking action means that over the summer, we need to get this funded so we can start with a pilot and find philanthropic foundations or other groups we want to do with this, all right? What's important with us is that action needs to be followed by more action, which means that we need sponsors in order to get the pilots, in order to gear up to do the other programs we want to do. The third thing is that we're always looking for people to join the cause as ambassadors who have a network who can then do the ripple effect in their part of the world, and et cetera. So just like Tamara was talking about the network she built of 20,000 plus people, that's the kind of power of this program that we want to do. So I say this to kind of circle back, and I want to take 1 minute longer, Victoria, so don't penalize me. I had the great privilege of meeting Michelle Obama years ago, and one of the most amazing people I've ever met. And I had a chance to chat with her with a colleague of mine who knows her very well from Chicago. And she had a famous quote that I think is the mantra where Jackie, where Rasha, where Pauline, where Tamara, everybody who's spoken, joined everybody kind of blends into this thread. And she said, success isn't about how your life looks to others. It's about how it feels to you. And I think the way that we want to present this to women is to say that we're here to help. We've got a system, and we want to get you to be scalable, sustainable. We want you to have the right scope, and we want you to be able to be solving problems in business, because if you do that, you can make a difference. So it's not either or, like what we were talking about earlier. You can do both, but you have to solve a business problem in order to make a difference. And because of that, you can grab other people and take them along with you. So again, thank you for participating. We are very passionate about PowerUp. We have a lot of action steps we want to do. And Victoria and I both are saying to everybody, hey, come help us, and let's go make it happen.
Thank you so much. I know we ran over, and when we creating this event, so we wanted to have 4 panelists, but then we kept getting such amazing speakers, and we wanted to create a sense of the global ecosystem of the world coming together. And that's why, you know, we're a little bit over. I apologize for that. I thank you all for joining us. I think this is the beginning of a wonderful journey, and that we can all play a part of. And we're going to be following up with the next steps to tell you guys more about all the amazing speakers and the work that they're doing, and how you can get involved in their regions and the resources that they've shared, as well as how you can get involved with PowerUp. Thank you again to everybody. Thank you to ECOS, Prepare for VC, Boston Technology, all the communities of female founders, and World Global Community. And let's make this change happen.